These two are both 100 megapixel monster cameras, the Phase One IQ3 Trichromatic and the Fujifilm GFX 100. So how do they stack up against each other? For many years, Phase One was the benchmark when it came to high-resolution digital medium format cameras. This IQ3 Trichromatic cost more than $40,000 when it was launched back in 2017. Very expensive. But in 2019, Fujifilm changed everything when it launched the GFX 100 at just $10,000 US. This is the Mark I version. It's been replaced by the Mark II model. But for many reasons, I still prefer this over the Mark II. But that's another video for another time. So let's compare these two cameras. They're both very heavy at 1.4 kg without any lens attached. They both have removable viewfinders. One is analog and one is digital. The Fujifilm GFX has an adjustable tilt viewfinder, which I find absolutely great. The GFX 100 has image stabilization, whereas the Phase One doesn't have. In terms of autofocus, they're very different. The Phase One has only got one single point, whereas the GFX can give you up to 400 points. In terms of speed, this allows you to shoot up to 5 frames per second, with the GFX Mark II capable of 8 frames per second. This, on the other hand, only allows you to shoot up to 1.5 frames per second. When it comes to sensor size, these two cameras are very different. The IQ3 Trichromatic, the sensor measures at 54 by 40 mm. The GFX 100, on the other hand, the sensor measures at 33 by 44 mm. The Phase One sensor is almost 1.5 times bigger than the GFX. Fujifilm calls the GFX series large format, but I personally prefer to think of it as medium format and large format. The Phase One really belongs on a tripod. In terms of shutter, they're both focal plane shutter cameras. But Phase One has many leaf shutter lenses available for you to mount onto the XF. The GFX allows you to mount Hasselblad H-mount lenses to use its leaf shutter capabilities, but there's no autofocus, unlike the Phase One. Because it's a mirrorless camera, the GFX allows you to mount 35mm full-frame lenses onto it, just that only some lenses can cover the full width of the sensor. Now, let's see how these two cameras stack up against each other in some practical tests. First, let's look at the Phase One Trichromatic. It has an unusually low native ISO of 35. At ISO 35, we can underexpose up to 5 stops and still get back the image in a usable manner. Note the green tint, which is typical of any digital image whenever we push up the exposure. Overexposure-wise, at ISO 35, we can overexpose up to 2 stops. When we switch to ISO 100, things changed. The colors at ISO 35 and ISO 100 look identical. But at ISO 100, we can overexpose up to 4 stops and underexpose up to 4 stops for a total usable range of 8 stops. I find ISO 100 to be a lot more practical with no visible quality loss compared to ISO 35. Now let's take a look at the GFX 100. At ISO 100, we can overexpose only by 2 stops before we lose the ability to get back the details. On the other hand, we can underexpose up to a very impressive 6 stops. So both the GFX and the Phase One have a usable range of 8 stops, but in very different ways. The Phase One is balanced with 4 stops for both overexposure and underexposure. The GFX dynamic range lies largely in the underexposure end with 6 stops. Now let's compare colors. In comparing these shots with the actual items, I can see that the Phase One Trichromatic has more accurate colors, especially in the greens and the reds. In terms of ISO, I will limit the Phase One to ISO 1600. At 3200, the noise levels look a little bit too high for my liking. The GFX, on the other hand, easily goes up to ISO 3200 and the image quality still looks good. Here's a comparison between the Phase One at ISO 1006 and the GFX at ISO 3200. The GFX has a noise pattern that's softer and is more film-like. The GFX has a dual gain sensor with native ISO at 100 and 500. Here's a comparison between ISO 400 and 500 underexposed by 4 stops. You can clearly see the difference in noise. ISO 500 is superior to ISO 400. So there you have it, the Phase One IQ3 Trichromatic versus the GFX. Both are amazing cameras, but with very different capabilities. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe below, and I'll see you again for more lights, camera, and action.